In the name I am that I am, son of tomorrow, I call forth the light of the living word, beloved Elohim, beloved archangels, beloved mighty choans of the rays and the lords of karma. I call for the action of beloved Pallas Athena, beloved goddess of liberty, beloved Nada, beloved Kuan Yin, beloved Portia, beloved great divine director, beloved all-seeing eye of God, Cyclopeia. Let God's will be done, let God's will be done, let God's will be done. I demand the action of the sacred fire in this hour. Descend on mighty cosmos, secret rays. I am the holding of the balance of Lord Gautama Buddha, beloved Sana Kumara and the seven holy Kumaras. I call upon the sacred fire, I call upon the light of God that never fails. Beloved mighty, I am present, come forth in this hour of the victory. Come forth in this hour of the victory of the God slain. I demand the full power of beloved mighty to be with us this night. Beloved Jesus, send to me, Lord, my Savior, Gautama and Son of Kumara. Come, Lord, now in the victory of the God slain. Send the light of 10,000 suns. Beloved mighty, stand, mighty, stand, mighty, stand. Around this fortune I call upon the great single sun magnet. I call upon the light of God that never fails. Beloved exhale, beloved exhale, beloved exhale. I call upon the electronic solar rings of the great central sun, the seraphim of God. I call for the electronic fire rings. I call for the rings of the great central sun. I call for the great central sun magnet and full power.
Good morning and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Free Association Radio. So now I've got my famous echo effect going on here, which means I have I'm hearing myself. Here we go. I found the culprit. There it is. That's much better. How is everybody? I am a little wiped out, I gotta tell you. I've been dealing, you can hear that, right? I've been dealing with more chest and head and all kinds of garbage. And apparently down here in Austin, they have a cedar tree, which goes crazy this time of year. And there's all kinds of pollen. Saturates the sky with pollen, and in hopes that it can, impregnate female cedar trees. Well, apparently these pollens, these histamines, have these nasty hooks and all kinds of stuff in them. Because what do? If you've got this pollen, you want to be able to have it hook onto the other, the other version of you. So there's some sophisticated docking equipment with these pieces of pollen, which unfortunately wreak havoc inside the nasal passages. So anyway, last night I was at the local grocery store, and I was totally spaced out because I was wiped out, totally wiped out. And I was sitting there on the vitamin aisle. I'm just standing in front of these supplements. I'm just looking at them. I mean, I don't really have a plan. I'm just looking. And this guy in the cowboy hat says, "This is what you need right here." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" He says, "Oh man, these drops they're the best for the cedar pollen." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Well, I didn't know about the cedar pollen. This is where I found out about the cedar pollen. So I got these drops, and so far so good. I mean, last night I actually slept for 10 hours. I broke a sweat, the fever, and hopefully getting back into some kind of physical form that is representative of moderately good health, which has been eluding me for the last 2 weeks. But enough about me. Let's talk about you and where we are in terms of the zodiac and where we're headed. This is, of course, the month of Aquarius. And Aquarius is an interesting sign. We're going to get into Aquarius here at the beginning of the day. And we're going to talk about some fascinating periods with Aquarius. One of the more interesting periods, as far as I'm concerned, is 1996. And 1996 happens to be a very pivotal year for many things, but mostly because of technology. In 1996, Uranus went into Aquarius. And we can do a quick scan of that year, and we can find out that there are some pretty fascinating pieces of information that we can pull some meaning from. The last atomic bomb test, theoretically, we just had one not long ago, right? I mean, we had one in, I believe it was Nevada, that the last atomic bomb test theoretically happened on the 21st of January in 1996. The Whitewater scandal broke in 1996, so actually it was 95, but on January 26, 1996, Hillary Clinton testified before a grand jury about Whitewater. Still to this day, a travesty of an investigation. And also, as it relates to Whitewater, Vince Foster, who wound up dead in a park in Washington, D.C. Whitewater, of course, is the name for what happened in Arkansas with the law firm that Hillary Clinton worked at, and actually helped get Bill Clinton and his cronies money through the public trust. What else happened during 1996? Part of what we're talking about and looking at here is revolution, because Aquarius is a revolutionary sign. And it's interesting to note that the president was inaugurated on the Sunday of this month, which was, well, just a few days ago. And I believe it was at 0 degrees Aquarius at that time. So this would portend a radical or revolutionary 4 years for the next version of the Obama administration. There was a central bank bombing back in the 1996 on the 31st of January. Killed 86 people, injured 1,400. This was in Sri Lanka. Some people did not like the idea of a central bank, apparently, in Sri Lanka. This is an interesting development. On the 10th of February, Deep Blue, which is IBM's supercomputer, defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov for the first time. That's a very Aquarian moment, by the way. Deep Blue defeating a chess champion. The IRA was active during 1996. On the 18th of February, a briefcase bomb in a bus killed the bomber and injured 9 people west of London. So here we have another radical or revolutionary signature at a very intense time, by the way, because now we're in Aquarius and conjunct Aquarius, Uranus, things like that. Let's see what else happened in 1996. That was interesting. The Dunblane Massacre. Wow, that's a biggie. I think this is what precipitated guns being taken out of schools, being taken out of the public trust. The Dunblane Massacre. Unemployed former shopkeeper Thomas Hamilton walked into Dunblane Primary School in Scotland and opens fire, killing 16 infant school pupils and 1 teacher before fatally shooting himself. Total Manchurian Candidate, March 13th. Interesting echoes from another time, isn't it? I think so. Let's see, what else? The British formally kind of accepted that people could get the, where is it here? The bovine spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow. That was on March 20th. So mad cow makes its debut in 1996 with Uranus and Aries. That's not really radical, is it? Not entirely. But if you look at, you go further through the 1996, 1997, 1998, and you track Uranus and Aries, what you'll find is you will find that the internet rises, that technology takes off like at a sharp right angle. Between 96 and 2000, it's one of the most intense and active periods for technology in really history. I mean, we began the whole notion of being able to go online and do things, buy music, visit websites. If you were an AOL person, you were chatting, you were publishing, you were doing all those things. This was all early Uranus and Aquarius, which is the epitome in some ways of Aquarius, as Aquarius being ruled by Uranus. That radical Benjamin Netanyahu, he got elected in 1996. So there you go, Nintendo game system, 64. Nintendo 64 is released in Japan. That's huge. That was a huge development in gaming, the 64-bit processor. That took gaming to an entirely different level. Entirely. Dolly the sheep, the first male to be successfully cloned from an adult cell, was born at the Roslin Institute. Isn't that interesting, the Roslin Institute? Is that where the Roslin Chapel is? Which is really the home of Freemasonry, the Knights Templar, the modern home of the Knights Templar. And of course, in 1996, we had the beginning of the Summer Olympics, which I was at, by the way. And then the Ramones played their last show in 1996. Wow, amazing. Punk rock extraordinaires, the Ramones, played their last show. Just a quick look at some of the people that are Aquarians. We have Rosa Parks, Betty Friedan, Angela Davis, Saul Alinsky, Gene Sharp, Charles Darwin, Sarah Jane Moore, Jimmy Hoffa, Roosevelt, James Dean, also Johnny Lydon from the Sex Pistols, a.k.a. Johnny Rotten. And then I thought what was really interesting was that Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth, the guys who have the most home runs, well, Barry Bonds theoretically does, but I don't take Bonds seriously. So Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth, the two guys that have the most home runs in baseball history, are born a day apart. Hank Aaron, the 5th of February, Babe Ruth, the 6th of February. Yoko Ono and Rasputin, the great mad monk who terrorized the Russian nobility. His birthday is actually on the 20th, I believe, of January, which makes him a very early Aquarius. So a lot of you don't know who Gene Sharp is. Let me read a little bit about Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp was probably the guy who was, in some ways, the mastermind of the Occupy movement. He's a professor emeritus of political science at the University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth. And he's known for his extensive writings on nonviolent struggle, which have influenced numerous anti-government resistance movements around the world. So Sharp was born in North Baltimore, Ohio, the son of an itinerant Protestant minister. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Social Sciences in 1949 from Ohio State University, where he also received his Master's of Arts in Sociology in 1951. In 1953-54, Sharp was jailed for 9 months after protesting the conscription of soldiers for the Korean War. He worked as a factory labor guide to a blind social worker and secretary to A.J. Muste, America's leading pacifist. Between 1955 and 1958, he was assistant editor of Peace News, the weekly pacifist newspaper. The next 2 years, he studied research in Oslo with Professor Arne Næss, who derived, together with Johann Gatland from Mahatma Gandhi's writings, the Satyagraha norms. In 1968, he received a doctorate of philosophy and political theory from Oxford University. Sharp has been a professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, since 1972. He simultaneously held research appointments at Harvard University's Center for International Affairs since 1965. In 1983, he founded the Albert Einstein Institute, a nonprofit organization devoted to studies and promotion of the use of nonviolent action in conflicts worldwide. The Albert Einstein Institution has received funding from the Ford Foundation, the International Republican Institute, the National Endowment for Democracy, while some former directors have come from the Rand Corporation and the Ford Foundation. The Rand Corporation, by the way, are they're a major arm of Big Brother. So we can see that Gene Sharp and some of the work he's done has been influenced by some very powerful institutions. To what end? We shall see. In 2009 and 2012, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Sharp was widely considered the favorite for the 2012 award. In 2011, he was awarded the Al Hebrew Peace Education Prize. In 2012, he was a recipient of the Right and Livelihood Award, as well as the Distinguished Lifetime Democracy Award. Gene Sharp described the sources of his ideas as in-depth studies of Mohandas K. Gandhi, A.J. Muste, Henry David Thoreau to a minor degree, and other sources footnoted in his 1973 book, The Politics of Nonviolent Action, which was based on his 1968 PhD thesis. In the book, a 3-volume classic on civil disobedience, provides a pragmatic political analysis of nonviolent action excuse me, as a method for applying power in conflict. Sharp's key theme is that power is not monolithic, that is, it does not derive from some intrinsic quality of those who are in power. For Sharp, political power, the power of any state, regardless of its particular structure or organization, ultimately derives from the subject of the state. His fundamental belief is that any power structure relies upon the subject's obedience to the orders of the rulers. If subjects do not obey, leaders have no power. In Sharp's view, all effective power structures have systems by which they encourage or extract obedience from their subjects. States have particularly complex systems for keeping subjects obedient. These systems include specific institutions, police, courts, regulatory bodies, but may also involve cultural dimensions that inspire obedience by implying that power is monolithic. The god cult of the Egyptian pharaohs, the dignity of the office of the president, moral or ethical norms and taboos. Through these systems, subjects are presented with a system of sanctions, imprisonment, fines, ostracism, and rewards, title, wealth, fame, which influence the extent of their obedience. Sharp identifies this hidden structure as providing a window of opportunity for a population to cause significant change in a state. Sharp cites the insight of Etienne de la Boutelle, 1530 to 1563, that the subjects of a particular state recognize that they are the source of the state's power. They can refuse their obedience, and their leaders will be left without power. Sharp published Waging Nonviolent Struggle, 20th Century Practices, 21st Century Potential in 2005. It builds on his earlier written works by documenting case studies where nonviolent action has been applied. And the lessons learned from these applications, it contains information on planning nonviolent struggle to make it more effective. For his lifelong commitment to the defense of freedom, democracy, and the reduction of political violence through scholarly analysis of the power of nonviolent action, the Peace Abbey of Sherborne, Massachusetts, awarded him the Courage of Conscience Award on April 4th, 2008. A feature documentary by Scottish director Ruard Arrow, How to Start a Revolution, about the global influence of Gene Sharp's work was released in September 2011. This is important to note, okay? Very important to note, because if we go back to 2011, this is where Sharp's influence really begins to snowball. Apparently, if you believe the general narrative or the agreed upon narrative, it's Sharp's work that actually kickstarts the color revolutions in the Middle East. And I would believe that there is some truth to that. However, I also believe that those revolutions, which may have used his philosophies as an underpinning, those revolutions were actually funded by governments in order to make these changes swift and final. One of those governments being this one. The film won Best Documentary and the Mass Impact Award at the Boston Film Festival in September 2011. The European premiere was held at London's Raindance Film Festival on October 2nd, 2011, where it also won Best Documentary. The film has been described as the unofficial film of the Occupy Wall Street movement. This is what I'm getting to. Being shown in Occupy camps in cities all over the world. The film has been screened to MPs and Lords of the British House of Parliament and won a Scottish BAFTA Award in April 2012. A How to Start a Revolution iPad app was released on the Apple Store on October 9th, 2012, including the documentary and several Gene Sharp's books. Sharp has been called the Machiavelli of nonviolence and the Clausewitz of nonviolent warfare. It is claimed by some that Sharp's scholarship has influenced resistance organizations around the world. Most recently, it is claimed that the protest movement that toppled President Mubarak of Egypt, this is what I was referring to earlier, drew extensively on his ideas, as well as the youth movement in Tunisia and the earlier ones in the Eastern European color revolutions that had been previously inspired by Sharp's work, although some have claimed Sharp's influence has been exaggerated by Westerners looking for a Lawrence of Arabia figure. Sharp's 1993 handbook, From Dictatorship to Democracy, was first published in Burma, 4th edition, 2010. It has since been translated into at least 31 other languages. It has served as the basis for the campaigns of Serbia's Otpor, who are also directly trained by the Albert Einstein Institute. So what we have here, if you really look at this, okay, we have a global mindset. This is a playbook, a series of playbooks that were created by Gene Sharp. And not only were they created by Gene Sharp, but the Einstein Institution, funded by people like the Rand Corporation, the Ford Foundation, and the Republican National Party, they actually trained people in nonviolence, how to organize. Fascinating stuff. Georgia's Kamari, Ukraine's Pora, Kyrgyzstan's KK, Kelkel, and Belarus's Zuber. These are all related and trained by the Einstein Institute. The Bible of Pora has been the book of Gene Sharp, also used by Otpor. It's called From Dictatorship to Democracy. Pora have translated it by themselves. We have written to Mr. Sharp and to the Albert Einstein Institute in the United States and became very sympathetic towards our initiative, and the institution provided funding to print over 12,000 copies of this book for free. Sharp's writings on civilian-based defense were used by Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian governments during their separation from the Soviet Union in 1991. The Iranian government charged protesters against alleged fraud in the 2009 elections with following Gene Sharp's tactics. The Tehran Times reported, according to the indictment, a number of the accused confessed that the post-election unrest was pre-planned, and the plan was following the timetable of the Velvet Revolution to the extent of over 100 stages. Of the 198 steps of Gene Sharp were implemented in the foiled Velvet Revolution. The coverage produced a backlash for some Egyptian bloggers. One journalist, Hossam el-Hawalawi, stated that not only was Mubarak's foreign policy hated and despised by the Egyptian people, but parallels were always drawn between the situation of the Egyptian people and their Palestinian brothers and sisters. The latter have been the major source of inspiration, not Gene Sharp, whose name I first heard in my life, only in February after we toppled the Mubarak government already, and whom the clueless New York Times ironically gives credit for our uprising. Another Egyptian writer and activist, Karim el-Rari, argued that Gene Sharp's writings are more about regime change than revolution. He defines the latter as having an ethical as well as a material dimension that Sharp deliberately avoids engaging with, and credits local circumstances and the spark provided by the Tunisian revolution for the Egyptian success. However, the Associated Press reported as early as September 2010, more than 4 months before the revolution, that Gene Sharp's work was being used by activists in Egypt close to political leader Mohammed el-Baradei. The New York Times reported that Sharp's book, From Dictatorship to Democracy, had been posted by the Muslim Brotherhood on its website during the 2011 Egyptian revolution. So Gene Sharp, born January 21st, very early Aquarius, extremely early Aquarius, perhaps one of the most important people in the world today as it relates to not just revolution, but regime change. And it's interesting, the distinction between revolution and regime change. Regime change means that there is kind of a changing of the guard, but there's not a thorough reconstitutionalization of the national soul of a group or a land or a country. Regime change means that there is a transition from one group to the next. So Sharp looks like, if he was not a direct, he was certainly an indirect architect of the revolutions that have been taking place since 2010. Very pivotal figure in Aquarius. Another Aquarius who's quite pivotal is one Saul Alinsky. Let's talk about Saul Alinsky. Give you the background on Saul. Here we go. Saul Alinsky is also an Aquarius. And again, somebody who is synonymous with revolution and regime change in his own way. I'll read you the bio, then we're going to go off script here a little bit for Alinsky. Saul David Alinsky, January 30th, 1909, June 12th, 1972, was an American community organizer and writer. He is generally considered to be the founder of modern community organizing. Do you see where we're going here? There's parallels. There are parallels between Gene Sharp and Saul Alinsky. We'll get into those parallels. In the course of nearly 4 decades of political organizing, Alinsky received much criticism, but also gave much praise from many public figures. His organizing skills were focused on improving the living conditions of poor communities across North America. In the 1950s, he began turning his attention to improving conditions in the African-American ghettos, beginning with Chicago's and later traveling to other ghettos in California, Michigan, New York City, and a dozen other trouble spots. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Alinsky was behind a program called Vista. And Vista was kind of like it was kind of like a group that would go into the inner cities and offer types of financial assistance and sort of, I don't know, moral support to people in the inner cities. My aunt belonged to Vista, and she actually was somebody that worked in the inner cities of Chicago. That's where she met her husband, I believe Charles, who eventually ripped her off for lots of money, check cashing, check kiting, and all that stuff, and her and Charles divorced. So my aunt lived with the White family in Chicago as part of the Vista program, which I'm pretty sure that Alinsky had his fingerprints on. He worked very closely within the Johnson administration, a.k.a. the Great Society. And the rise of the welfare state in this country can be linked almost solely to Saul Alinsky. Alinsky would go into communities or districts, and he basically would say, hey, look, there's all this money available for welfare. You should take it. And they would say, well, no, we really don't need any government assistance. And then Alinsky kind of, twisted their arms to take public assistance. And Saul Alinsky was the Pied Piper of welfare. He was the guy that spread government assistance all throughout the country. Why? Because it did a number of things. It gave him some very influential people to work with, and I believe Saul Alinsky was determined to bring about some form of regime change in and of itself here in this country based on socialism. He was a socialist, social/communist. Now, I'm not sure about Gene Sharp. I'm assuming that Gene Sharp is a socialist as well. But socialism is another factor and another element to the sign of Aquarius, because Aquarius represents the collective. Am I right? Yes, it represents the collective. It represents the body, the axis mundi, everybody. So in an ideal Aquarian world, everybody gets fed, everybody has enough clothes, everybody has a place to live, everybody has enough gas in their car, there's equality across the board, gays get to marry, intermixing of races, it's the rainbow. It's the rainbow tribe, which is a signature that came out of Chicago, by the way. The Rainbow Coalition and Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson is not an Aquarius. I believe he's a Libra. Excuse me. All right, let's read a little more about Saul Alinsky. His ideas were later adapted by some U.S. college students and other young organizers in the late 1960s and formed part of their strategies for organizing on campus and beyond. So we're talking about SDS. So make no mistake, Saul Alinsky and a lot of the Chicago radical group, the Chicago radical set, Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, they all had forms of concourse and course connections between one another. So William F. Buckley said he was very close to being an organizational genius. All right, let's get into his background here. Saul David Alinsky was born in Chicago, Illinois, 1909 to Russian Jewish immigrant parents. He was the only surviving son of Benjamin Alinsky's marriage to his second wife, Sarah Tannenbaum Alinsky. Alinsky stated during an interview that his parents never became involved in the new socialist movements. He added they were strict Orthodox, their whole life revolved around work in synagogue. I remember as a kid being told how important it was to study. Because of his strict Jewish upbringing, he was asked whether he ever encountered anti-Semitism. Well, growing up in Chicago, he replied, it was so pervasive, you didn't even really think about it. You just accepted it as a fact of life. He considered himself to be a devout Jew until the age of 12, after which time he began to fear that his parents would force him to become a rabbi. I went through some pretty rapid withdrawal symptoms and kicked the habit. But I'll tell you one thing about religious identity, he added, whenever anyone asks my religion, I always say, and always will say, Jewish. At the same time, he was also an agnostic. Saul Alinsky was a Luciferian. He dedicated rules to radicals to Lucifer. That's exactly what he did. Absolutely. Here's a little snippet from Alinsky. It was an interview in Playboy, of all places. Alinsky, if there is an afterlife and I have anything to say about it, I will unreservedly choose to go to hell. Why? Hell would be heaven for me. All my life, I've been with the have-nots. Over here, if you're a have-not, you're short of dough. If you're a have-not in hell, you're short of virtue. Once I get into hell, I'll start organizing the have-nots over there. Why then? They're my kind of people. So Saul Alinsky was very clear that there's a very good chance that he was going to go to hell if there was an afterlife, which is absolutely fascinating. Let's do a little bit of rules for radicals, shall we? Let's go over here. Let's go to Wikipedia. So rules for radicals is a pragmatic primer for realistic radicals. Again, this is right along the same lines of Gene Sharp, two people creating templates, blueprints, documents in order to facilitate large social change at a mass level. Okay? In the first chapter, the opening paragraph, Alinsky writes, what follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. The Prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals is written for the have-nots on how to take it away. Interesting stuff. So one of the things that Alinsky does in Rules for Radicals is he is really into polarization. Okay? Polarization is the key for community organizing. And polarization is something that we as a nation now are firmly entrenched in. And, oh, by the way, one of Solomon's students, not directly but indirectly, is our current president, Barack Obama. One of his students directly was Hillary Rodham Clinton, who studied at the elbow with Solomon's. So let's read a few of the rules. Rule number 1, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Power is derived from two main sources, money and people. Have-nots must build power from flesh and blood. Rule number 2, never go outside the expertise of your people. It results in confusion, fear, and retreat. Feeling secure adds to the backbone of anyone. Rule number 3, whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. Look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety, and uncertainty. What do you think is going on with the American people right now? What do you think that the American people are feeling? Let me just read those last 3 words. Insecurity, anxiety, and uncertainty. Isn't it interesting that these are 3 words that can speak to the current tenor of our times? Where do they come from? Saul Alinsky. Rule number 3, whenever possible, rule number 4, make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. If the rule is that every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because no one can possibly obey all of their own rules. This was a big tenet of Alinsky. Especially, he would get people all the time, especially on the moral tip, with this strategy. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. So if you are somebody who's an alternative researcher, what happens to you? What do you get labeled as? You get labeled as a conspiracy theorist, a tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist. And guess what comes along with that? Ridicule. Am I right? Absolutely. Rule number 6, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. They'll keep doing it without urging and come back to do more. They're doing their thing, and we'll even suggest better ones. Rule number 7, a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. Rule number 8, keep the pressure on, never let up. Keep trying new things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit them from the flank with something new. That's called asymmetric strategy. You hit them from the front, and you hit them from the side. You come at them from angles. Rule number 9, the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Imagination and ego can dream up many more consequences than any activist. This is something I think we need to really take to heart. And I'll read that again. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. One of the things that we have to deal with all the time is the threat of some outside force. At least people that are into the quote-unquote truth movement or alternative research, we think about the threat of an outside source coming in and pulling the hammer down, whether it's grabbing guns or taking us off to FEMA camps. Think about that. The threat. It's the threat that is actually more powerful than the thing itself. Rule number 10, if you push a negative too hard, it will push through and become a positive. Violence from the other side can win the public to your side because the public sympathizes with the underdog. That's an interesting rule. Rule number 11, the price of successful attack is a constructive alternative. Never let the enemy score points because you're caught without a solution to the problem. Rule number 12, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. That's it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. This guy was ruthless. He was absolutely, utterly ruthless. And you know where he learned or who he learned from. He learned from Al Capone. Al Capone, the gangster, the Chicago gangster. He spent a lot of time with Al Capone because Alinsky studied criminology. Didn't become a lawyer, he studied criminology. He wanted to get into the mind of criminals. And criminals are some of the best organizers around. And criminals employ a lot of the same tactics that Alinsky is talking about here. But let me read rule number 12 again. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. Absolutely fascinating stuff. And let's see a few others here, a few other radicals. Rosa Parks, of course, we all know who Rosa Parks is. Sat on that bus, sat in the front, trained along with Martin Luther King Jr. at the, I think it's at the Northwood School, is that right, in Tennessee. Betty Friedan, the author of The Feminine Mystique, a radical exploration into the ideas of feminism, also an Aquarius. Angela Davis, a radical teacher connected to the Black Panther Party movement, also an Aquarian. Charles Darwin, the man who really changed scientific inquiry in our whole notions of social science in many ways, and not for the better, I think. Also an Aquarian. Sarah Jane Moore. Sarah Jane Moore was somebody who was influenced by the radical ideas of the 60s and tried her very best to kill Gerald Ford. Didn't do it, didn't make it. She's still alive, by the way. Jimmy Hoffa, the great union organizer, again, organizing social activism, the collective. He was an Aquarius. Roosevelt, the man who created the WPA and, all these massive social programs. In fact, if you go back during that time and you look at some of the press clippings for when Roosevelt was in office, and he was stating that he was going to do the things that he was going to do, it was much like how people view Barack Obama in our current social milieu. Roosevelt was not liked by many people. Many people were actually called him a communist or a socialist. So this is a key figure here in the pantheon of Aquarian revolutionaries. Roosevelt was revolutionary. What he did with government was revolutionary. James Dean, the ultimate rebel, an Aquarian. And John Lydon, as I mentioned before, lead singer of the Sex Pistols, punk rock, the Aquarian soundtrack to the late 1970s. And then Yoko Ono, of course. Okay, so we've just gotten to Aquarius. We've talked about two major figures, Gene Sharp, Saul Alinsky. We looked at kind of a pivotal time in the early 90s, actually the mid-90s, when Uranus goes into Aquarius and we see the rise of the Internet and the boom in technology. Things like MP3s, MP4, all the codecs that we're using now, HTML, JavaScript, they all really explode during the late 90s when Uranus is in Aquarius. I kind of miss Uranus in Aquarius, to be honest with you. That was a fun time. Okay, it is 12:44 here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the phone lines, 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. You can call in, and I'll be doing some free readings here. And, you can avail yourself of my time and your time as well. 347-308-8995. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play a little piece of music here, and then when I come back, we're going to get into some readings. What do I want to play? How about this track, Magma? Let's listen to Magma. This is Magma, and I'll be back in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. nice little jaunty little tune, isn't it? It is 12:49 here in Austin, Texas, and I'm coming to you live. This is Navigating the Astrological Matrix. I'm Robert Phoenix, your host and your navigator. I have a new post up on the site. Actually, it's not a new one, up just over the weekend, and it's horoscopes for the year for all signs. If you haven't seen it, I urge you to go check it out. It took me about a week and a half to put that thing together. 6,000 words in all. And you can go there and you can find out what 2013 has in store for you. So one of the things I'm going to be writing about next is this whole Jupiter retrograde Gemini experience that we've got going on right now, which I think is, it's important to note. And one of the things that I'm experiencing is that there are literally two worlds being created right now. And this is part of the polarization experience that Saul Alinsky talks about in Rules for Radicals and what we're experiencing on a national level. I mean, just look at the last election and how deeply divided as a nation we were. But I've been thinking about this in terms of timelines and in terms of, where we are with our world. And a few months back, I started to explore this possibility of what would life be like on the other side of 12/21/12, and would there be an event that would force us to kind of loop back to another timeline, which was a timeline that was created with the death of John Fitzgerald Kennedy and the inception of 9/11. And sure enough, there was that event. That event is Sandy Hook, and we are now moving closer towards a particular timeline, which is not a pretty one, by the way. It is not one that is really hopeful or that optimistic, to be honest with you. It is a timeline that's based, in my estimation, on extreme measures that relate to security, lack of privacy, surveillance, and the absolute crushing energies of a totalitarian fascistic police state. We're getting very close to that, I believe. It's getting closer and closer with each passing day. And every time we have an event, like what happened in Sandy Hook or what happened yesterday in Houston, Texas, where there was some form of public shooting, these measures, these controls become more evident as they manifest in our world. One of the things that I've been thinking about along with this is the power of television and the power of emotion on a collective level to move people along a particular timeline. So, for instance, if you have witnessed whatever Sandy Hook is, right, and you've witnessed it to the degree that it has moved you on an emotional level, that it has crystallized and codified your point of view, that your perspective is now rooted in an ideology that is based on something quite emotional, what you're now doing as an individual is you are anchoring the future, you are anchoring the timeline. And this is why I think we have to be very careful with these events, not just with these events, but how we view the events, because there are studies that are coming out about television and how television really, what television does, it literally programs you. It gets into your brain, it moves your neurons around, and it tweaks your synapses, and the next thing you know, you're operating from a belief system or a point of view that's not even your own. And I firmly believe that what we have going on here with these events is a codification or solidification of a future timeline. That's exactly what's happening. And it's done through emotion. Emotion is the key. Emotion is the critical factor that catalyzes all of this and puts it into play. So one of the things that we're dealing with here with this timeline, or the timeline split, where people are literally living in two different worlds. I mean, I can't even begin to communicate this clearly enough, because I'm on Facebook and I'm looking at people that were my friends, and I say we're sometimes. I mean, they're in a different world. They see the world completely differently. They've got different value systems, and they have different strategies, social strategies, you name it. I mean, I have nothing in common with these people. And a lot of it now are fueled by what's happened recently with this whole Sandy Hook event. And then you begin to look at some of the signs and signifiers in the culture around us, and you begin to see that there's something really up. And you begin to look at this notion of Gemini and Jupiter Gemini, especially retrograde, and then what comes out of it. Yesterday I put up a post on Facebook, which was so odd. It was a coach for a team in the National Hockey League, and his doppelganger was right behind him, sitting right behind him. Apparently they didn't know the guy, but he looked just like the coach. I mean, there are symbols that are constantly popping up now of these sort of doppelgangers and doubles, and what they are is they're collective symbols, obviously, of two worlds operating simultaneously at once. Even in the National Football League, where in 2 weeks we're going to have the Super Bowl, what do we have? We have two brothers that are playing against, well, they're not playing against each other, but they're coaching against each other. This has never happened before. This has never happened before in the history of the National Football League. So, again, we have kind of the Gemini theme with two brothers separated by 17 months, coaching against one another at the highest stage of the sporting arena, so to speak. So this is where we are. We're diverging into two separate worlds. And we are not there physically, although it's likely that I probably won't see a lot of the people that I'm not having anything in common with, but certainly ideologically, psychologically, and spiritually, we're moving en masse in two separate locations or two separate spaces. And it's sad in some ways, but in another way, it's probably kind of inevitable, again, with the amount of polarization that's been inflicted upon our society. All right, let's go to our friend Athena's mind, all the way out there, halfway across the world. Hello there.
Hi.
How are you doing? I'm good.
I'm good. You're my news. I'm just listening to what's happening in America through you. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. What else do you want to know?
Well, I wanted to tell you what's going on in my village right now. They just had the elections for Parliament, and so the whole night now is going to be filled with gunfire.
Is that celebrating whoever won? Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, they're celebrating, and it's really funny because, I mean, this is how they celebrate for anything, high school graduation, weddings, whatever, and I never hear about the bullets coming down on people. It's so strange.
Yeah, I used to live in Oakland, and they did a lot of that in Oakland, too, and I don't think anybody really ever got hurt. It is odd, isn't it?
It is. I always wonder, where are those, I see them going up. Where are they landing,
I think you've got angels working overtime. That's what I think.
I guess so. Yeah, well, everybody's happy here, so that's nice. And I just wanted to know what you see for me in my chart for the next, couple of months.
Oh, okay.
In the immediate future. And my birthday's May 19th, 1968.
All right, let's do since you're the only person on the line, let's do a full chart for you.
Really?
Yes, it's your lucky day. But here's some more news. Beyonce lip synced at the inauguration. Did you know that?
No.
And I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was appropriate. It was like, we had somebody who was faking a song for another person who's faking his presidency. So, no, just kidding.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was an interesting little symbol there. Okay, let's go to you and let's get into your stats. Okay, go ahead. When were you born?
May 19th.
Okay.
1968.
1968. What time?
12:09.
12:09. Is that PM or AM?
AM.
AM. Okay.
I'm hoping that's right. I should be Aquarius moon and Aquarius rising. Does that sound about right?
Well, we're going to find out. Where were you born?
Oh, sorry. Salt Lake City, Utah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Hey, is there like a connection between Mormons and the state of Connecticut? Like, is there a large Mormon community in Connecticut?
I think there is a small, because Mitt has a house there.
Mm-hmm. I have you as a Capricorn rising, by the way, with an Aquarian moon.
Okay, so then that for sure is wrong. See, I keep getting mixed up on my time.
So it should be PM then?
No, it's AM definitely, but I get mixed up between the 1 and the 12. So what time do you have it down?
Let's see, hold on. Let's see this. Okay, so you have Aquarius rising and moon in Aquarius at 1:09 a.m.
Okay, that's it then.
All right, well, there we go. You've got that big, you've got the major squares in your chart, right? You've got those two T-squares and then the oppositions. But this is an intense chart. I haven't looked at your chart in a while. So the year ahead, next few months, let's see what we got going on for you.
Journey moving.
Moving.
Across the world to Belize.
To Belize in particular, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you've got Saturn up in your 9th house for this year. In fact, Saturn's going to be in your 9th house for the next 2 years. And when Saturn is in the 9th house, you're dealing with, obviously, any 9th house stuff will encompass foreign countries. But I don't necessarily think that moving with Saturn in your 9th house all the way across the world would be a particularly good thing, unless, of course, you had amazing astrocartography for Belize, which we can check out, by the way. But Saturn in the 9th house generally denotes kind of a sense of gravity, and I don't know. I don't get that, because let's say you had Jupiter transiting through your 9th house in 2013, I would say you can move anywhere you want, or let's say you had Uranus sort of moving through the end part of your 9th house. Uranus was transiting your 9th house, was triggering some. But Saturn generally means, my experience with Saturn is that once it's in a certain house for a while, it's going to be about limitation. So you're going to experience limitation no matter where you are. Whether are you in Jordan? Is that where you are?
Yeah, Jordan.
So whether it's Jordan or Belize, you're going to experience some form of limitation. So I don't think moving is going to magically lift the veil on your limitation. Saturn generally is like, hang in there, work it out, go through with it, deal with it. But we could definitely look at Belize. Well, the other thing too, though, if we go down to your 4th house, Jupiter is getting ready to go forward in your 4th house, and it's going to conjunct your Mars. And 4th house is home. You're restless anyway, right? I mean, you've got that Mars down in the 4th house. So even if you move to Belize, you're still going to be restless. That's just part of who you are. One of the things that would help with the restlessness is that whenever you go to a place, you need to start building. You've got to either build homes or build community, or you've got to build, because Mars in the 4th house, Gemini, is just, you've got to have something. You've got to be able to do something creative, with your home and the world around you. So, I mean, potentially, with Jupiter going forward and hitting your Mars, there's potential for that. But you're still going to be dealing with Saturn. You're still going to be dealing with limitation. You're still going to be dealing with really how to transform your own experience.
What's up with Saturn? How do you make Saturn good? I feel like it's haunting me.
Well,
where is Saturn good at, and when is that happening for me?
I don't think it's a bad thing to have it in your 9th house. But one of the things that you would do, let's say with Saturn in the 9th house in Scorpio, is that you would try to learn as much about the local culture. You would try to get into the local mythology. Maybe you would go to school and study the local language. I mean, that would all be Saturn ninth house stuff. It'd be like going deeper into your experience. It wouldn't be about sort of uprooting and then leaving. It would be about really plunging in and getting more to the core of, why you're there, what this place is, who they are, what the history is, things like that. I mean, it would be like sort of instead of running away from it, you'd go in the opposite direction and you would embrace it, because that's what Saturn makes you do. It makes you, because our instinct with Saturn is to get the hell out, cut ties, move on, leave people. But that's not what Saturn calls for. Saturn calls for going in the opposite direction and rooting and going deeper into your experience. I mean, the thing too with Saturn in the ninth house is that ultimately, because it's really just in there, it just moved in there in let's see, November. So you have a whole.
What is the ninth house? What is
it? What is it?
Yeah, I forget.
The ninth house is foreign countries, other cultures. It's law, it's philosophy, it's religion, it's animals, it's consciousness in some ways. I think the ninth house is a very philosophical house. It gives you the big picture, the broad view. It also rules athletics and animals too. The ninth house.
So does that mean that if I have Saturn in my ninth house and I'm here in Jordan and I have been on this spiritual mission kind of uncovering since I've been here, and also now a huge interest in the ancient sites. So now is this saying that this would be the time to be doing that because it's all
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have a strong interest in that, and even though Belize sounds like so fabulous to be living on an island, I feel like I would be leaving things undone. So
well, that would be true with Saturn in your ninth house, because you wouldn't have finished your program. You see, the thing with Saturn too, with going through the ninth house, is it sets up a major transit when Saturn hits the midheaven and then goes into the 10th house. And so you're preparing for that major transit of Saturn moving into your 10th house. And everything you do prior to that transit is very important, because the 10th house is about public standing, being in the public eye, being recognized and noticed for what you do and who you are. And in a lot of ways, this Saturn transit is going to be reconciling many, many things for you when it moves into your 10th house. It's going to be right on your Neptune. So this combination of sort of, the desire to disperse and to be one with everything, which is very Neptunian. You have a very strong Neptunian influence in your chart because it's on the midheaven. You just want to, you just want to be one with everything. You want to be able to merge and to have this sense of connectedness with all things, with Neptune there. But it's one of the hardest, I think it's one of the hardest aspects also to have in the 10th house and on the midheaven, because it's so ephemeral. Things are fleeting, things are moving. You can have these wonderful glimmers and insights into the wondrous interconnectivity of all things, and then what? Then it's like, well, it's back to the grind. It's back to being a body on Earth. That's kind of what it's like. So when Saturn moves onto your midheaven, then it hits your Neptune, it has the opportunity for you to make a lot of these things very real for yourself. These feelings, these aspirations, these thoughts, these concepts. Saturn comes in and says, okay, here it is. You get to make this stuff real. And a lot of it is presaged by the ninth house transit. So all the knowledge, all the insights, all the epiphanies that you have between now and 2.5 years from now, they all go into this very pivotal moment for you, because if you look at it, Neptune is at the top of this massive network of T-squares. It squares the moon, it squares Jupiter, it opposes Venus, it opposes the sun. And in some ways, I think Saturn on your Neptune going right on your midheaven is the culmination of your life's work in some ways. It's sort of, and not in a bad way, but it's the culmination of and the beginning of something new. And there's a resolution of all these disparate elements in your chart, not without some challenge, because Saturn's going to square your moon, it's going to square your Jupiter, and it's going to make you. The thing with the sun and where your sun is down in the 4th house, and Mars in the 4th house, is that you have a lot of mental capacity. You're very curious, but you don't always have the ability to kind of make it stick. So with Saturn growing up into your Neptune, the work that you do will be about making it stick, will be about having some kind of really concrete form for your ideas and your thoughts, because you're super, super curious. And Saturn on Neptune is, okay, well, this is what it's going to look like. And that can be anything from a book or possibly a dissertation or possibly a series of workshops or whatever it is. I mean, you're in a lot of ways, you're here to teach, okay? So Saturn gets you ramped up for your next phase of your life, which I believe is teaching.
Well, that makes sense, because I want to do everything you mentioned, and also documentaries.
There you go. Documentaries would be great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's Neptune. That's film. So maybe what you want to do is you want to take documentary footage or film footage or video footage of where you go, people you talk to, stuff like that, so that when Saturn does hit your Neptune, you'll have all this content that's at your fingertips.
So I'm still kind of like gathering my information, because I've been gathering information since I've been here, but it hasn't all come together yet. So I'm still going to be gathering, and then in a couple of years, it'll all come together, and I'll be able to go out to the public with it.
So let's look at, just out of curiosity, let's look at Jordan for you in terms of astrocartography. This will be interesting. And then we'll look at Belize. All right, where are you? I don't think you change the name.
I've been interested in Belize because before this I was interested in Petra, the ancient city of Petra here, and how is in alignment with the constellations. And then I wanted to investigate its points, figure out its ley lines and stuff, and kind of do that research about it, the magnetics. And I have this just feeling that there's some kind of connection with the pyramid in Belize. So when Belize popped up, I was like, oh, wow. But I'm not quite ready for it, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Well, I think that's brilliant. I think that's exactly what we're talking about with Saturn, 9th house. That kind of like going into it, going in depth, making connections. Okay, so, look at this. What do you know?
What?
Your Saturn is right on the midheaven where you are. So Saturn runs right through Jordan. And now you have Saturn, your own, you're transiting Saturn, getting closer to your midheaven. I think that's quite good, to be honest with you. Belize is down here. Let's just see.
In particular, San Pedro.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad place for you, but I think you've committed. Interestingly enough, you've committed to living in a Saturn environment, and until you get what you need out of that environment, you're going to feel like you're not complete, and that's the big piece with Saturn. You have to experience a sense of completion. You have to experience a sense of coming full circle with things, because Saturn also rules time, and what you're dealing with here is a cycle for whatever reason. And I do think Belize would actually be an interesting place for you. You've got Mars, Jupiter running through there. It's not as direct as Saturn. Let me just read you the textbook definition of Saturn here in the midheaven.
Okay.
It says, with the position of Saturn in midheaven, you're required to deal with your professional and social ambitions. Your personal goals undergo a critical test. You may face difficulties if you have unrealistic expectations, or if you have had a tendency in the past to omit and neglect certain parts of your duties. You may be required to assume greater responsibility and increase performance. Here you are confronted with the situation to either fight completely for a cause or to yield under the pressure of your duties. Your pride and strong ambition can attract powerful opponents, but you meet such opposition with stoic serenity and unflinching firmness, trusting in your own abilities. You make patience and time a prerequisite to all your endeavors, and this turns out in your favor. In these regions, there is a good chance of coming closer to finding your true destiny. You divorce yourself from misleading illusions or false ideals and focus your efforts on solving attending problems. Step by step, you make your long-term projects come true. You are generally admired for the way in which you complete tasks, for which you gain recognition and respect. You are seen as a public role model for independence and discipline. And that's all right there where you are. So I would say if you wanted to really sink your teeth into something, you're in the right place. And if you were to leave, especially, is what you want to do, right? You want to be in that place when transiting Saturn hits your own midheaven. I think some really profound realizations and breakthroughs can occur for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it all makes sense, all of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard though because I'm not having any fun, and I have a lot of Aquarius, so.
Well, you also have a lot of Gemini, and Gemini needs to be amused. Trust me, Gemini needs to be amused.
Maybe that's why I'm so antsy.
It could be, but Saturn is not really about fun. Saturn.
I know. That's why I'm having a hard time with it. But I have thought, there are ways to have fun through making a point. Like, in America, how we have so many different joke shows.
Right.
I always get a kick out of those. So I've thought about using that method to get my points across about things I want to change here, like littering and for example, the religion is very strict. They tell you that many things are haram. Haram means like you'll burn in hell if you do it. And so my kids, I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they're out intermixing with the other kids and stuff, and they'll come back and they'll say, my friend told me if I look at an owl, my eyes will start bleeding. And I'm just like, that's crazy, like it's not going to happen. And so then I was thinking, well, maybe we should make a paper mache owl, put it in a tree with a speaker that says, woo, woo, like this, and then have the kids go, oh, look, an owl, and like turn away from the kids.
Right.
Look at the owl, activate the fake blood in their eyes, and then turn around and go, my eyes are bleeding, and like totally freak them out.
I think you'd probably get deported pretty quickly on something like that. No, I think it's a good idea because what you're running up against is again Saturn in the 9th house, which is religious beliefs, right? And Saturn is pressure, Saturn is gravity, Saturn is concentration. So rubbing up against limitations in terms of beliefs is something you would definitely encounter. So that,
do you think that could be dangerous though if you do it in a funny way, like just take a look at this? Isn't this ridiculous? You're looking at an owl is not going to make your eyes bleed. Just like lizards really don't want to eat your salt. They kill lizards. They see a lizard, they just kill it right there because they say that it's going to attack their salt. And I'm just like, that's ridiculous. If this was true, there would be lizards down at the Dead Sea. The whole thing would be infested. Well,
it's really interesting because if you look at the symbol of the lizard and you look at the symbol of the owl, these are very powerful esoteric symbols. The owl is the symbol of Moloch. And it's also very much connected to pedophilia, the owl. So, I could see where they would have an almost superstitious kind of relationship with the owl. And of course, the lizard is like the reptiles. It's like, related to reptilians. And, this probably goes back many, 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 many years when people were, walking around the same planet as their reptilian gods. So, this grudge has gone on for a long time. So you're dealing with some very deeply entrenched and almost occult-like paranoia or behavior. So I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I would certainly take a lot of notes from it because it's kind of fascinating in a strange way.
Well, especially when you say that, because they have a belief also that the Dead Sea, the reason why God flipped it and made it salty was because of pedophilia, homosexual.
Interesting. Well, that is a culture that has some very challenged ideas and behaviors around homosexuality because of the fact that it's really important for them to marry a woman that's a virgin in that culture. And if you are young and you cannot have any kind of sexual relationships with a woman because she's saving herself, well, who does that leave? It leaves other boys and older men. And it's one of the darker secrets of Islam is the relations that go on so they can satisfy the sexual urge without deflowering the virgins of their choice. So they've got some skeletons in their closet around that. But it's interesting. So you're going to run into a lot of really old beliefs that have probably lived on for a very long time. Some of them are really rooted in esoteric and occult symbols. And maybe there were times when it was important to adhere to those beliefs, but perhaps not now. So,
in your opinion, would you say it's dangerous to do something like that, though, if you're kind of trying to get them to look in a humorous way? Or
I don't know. Look, you're dealing with Saturn. I'm not sure I would cross that bridge with Saturn.
Okay.
I would take notes more than anything. That's what I would do. I mean, if you
put it in a book or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you decide to hold a mirror up to them, and their mirror and it's not a flattering reflection, it could go wrong, especially for your kids. And it sounds like your kids are pretty young, and you want them to have a positive experience. And you don't want a tribe of kids descending upon them for being heathens or whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, they get enough stuff for just being American and having light hair. All the kids touch their hair every time they go out, and they're like, everybody touches us. We don't want to go out. And I'm like, they're just curious. And they're like, well, they mess up my hair, and I'm tired of it. I don't know what to say.
Well, it could be worse.
Yeah,
right?
It could be.
It could be. I mean, it could be in a place where they want to scalp their hair, so you can always remind them about that.
Yeah, there's still places like that?
I think so. Yeah. Hey, listen. Do you want to be put back? Do you want to be put back on hold, or do you want to bug out?
I want to continue on with what's going on in America.
All right.
Thank you.
That's Athena's mind, all the way from Jordan. Let's go to the 828. Hello there.
Hey, Robert.
Who's
This
this?
is Joe in Asheville.
Hey, what's going on with you? I was actually thinking about you this morning.
You were?
I was.
Cool. In a good way or a bad way? What were you thinking?
I don't think of too many people in a bad way, and if I do, they're not people I know personally. That way.
Well, I hear that you're pretty stuffed up, but I missed the first part of the show. My computer was fitzing out, so I read in your chat room something about pollen. You struggling with pollen there in Texas?
So apparently, Austin, Texas, is the pollen capital of the world.
Oh, really? Oh. Now, you've been dealing with this for like 3 weeks or something, huh?
Yeah. So what happened, when I was a kid, I had brutal allergies. And then if you live in a place long enough, eventually you begin to create your own antibodies for the allergies. And so by the time I was in my late teens and early 20s, my body in California had developed its own strategy to deal with the various histamines in that area.
Right.
So I was fine in California. It's like, allergies? Who has allergies? I don't have allergies anymore. Look at me. I overcame my allergies. Man, we're not special, So then I dropped down to here, and then the first thing that happened, well, it's not the first thing, but right around the holidays, I started to get sick from the chemtrail flu. And then the cedar pollen kicked in. So I had these allergies on top of being sick, which I've never had before, because even in California, we wouldn't get allergies until the acacia would bloom. When the acacia would bloom, then people would start to sneeze and get, runny nose and stuff. But here, it's like wintertime, and apparently these cedar trees they're like these incredibly macho cedar trees, and all they want to do is put their pollen sperm into the wind.
Well, maybe you need to drink some cedar tea and offer tobacco to the cedar spirits and smudge.
Well, I think I found, like I said, I was at the local grocery store last night, and I was in kind of a zombie-like state, catatonic, just kind of staring at all these things. Like, how many of these things do I need to take in order to feel better? And this guy with a cowboy hat just walks right over and says, "This is what you need."
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm like, that's interesting. It is this tincture it's like a homeopathic tincture that's specifically for cedar.
Interesting.
And it was like, it was $16. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. But, if it's going to help me,
I'll
go. So anyway, I took it, and I've actually I noticed an immediate difference. And I mean immediate, yeah. So I'm on the rebound, and I got 10 hours of sleep last night. And so it'll just be a few more days, and I'll be up and at 'em. Thank you for asking.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I was curious as to whether or not you can look backwards in the chart area to November when I went in the hospital with my ruptured appendix.
Okay.
Because things have been pretty intense since then.
I think I have you up on my
Probably do. We did a chart back in May last year.
Yep. All right, hold on. Let's see what we got here. And let me see. Going through. There you are. How's your boy doing?
He's all right. Things have been kind of intense. He'll be 13 on the 15th of February. He's an Aquarian, speaking of Aquarius.
Yeah.
But since my surgery, I don't know, I've been dealing with some heavy-duty trauma, and they went through my belly button. My theory is that, they went through the belly button to do part of the surgery, and I think it opened up some trauma, childhood, I don't know what, mother stuff. And,
mother stuff. Well, there you go.
Big mother stuff.
Yeah, well, so when in November?
It was a new moon that I went in the hospital on the 13th, and they sent me home, and I was in agony for a day and went back, and then they said, oh, yeah, your appendix is burst. You need emergency surgery now. And then I was there for 5 days.
So, you have Neptune down there in your 4th house.
Right.
So that's where Scorpio is.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been, I'm sorry, what was the day again? It was...
it was the 13th and the 15th. It was, the 15th was when I had surgery. The 13th is when I first went in the hospital, which I think was a new moon. Let's
go back into ephemeris here. And all the way back into 2012. The good old days.
I know.
The good old days of 2012.
But things have been right. I know. It's just been weird since then. I've been just dealing with a lot of trauma processing, and Ryan had to go live with his dad for a while.
That was an intense new moon. I remember that. It was very intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then at the same time, Mercury was retrograde too, in Sag at 3 degrees, and then Saturn was in Scorpio at 3 degrees. And then, so let's go back, and so the Sun at that time was 21. So you had Sun just on the other side of your Neptune, and then the new moon was at 3. So the new moon was coming into your 4th house, and would have been in your 4th house, right? So you would have had new moon conjunct Neptune right at that time. That would have been a challenging time, I think, for surgery, to be honest with you, because Scorpio rules surgery, and Scorpio rules surgery, and because if you look at like Taurus is like the body, right? Taurus is the body, it's health, it's everything that's physical. Scorpio is opposite the body, so we're talking about things like X-rays, surgery, triage. Those are all very Scorpionic things. In terms of,
and I took longer to recover than they said usually people are out in 3 days, but I was in for 5 days, and actually ended up having to go back in on Thanksgiving Day to the emergency room because I was having this terrible pain in my rib. And they said, oh, you might have a pulmonary embolism, and so they made me do more CAT scans or MRIs, I don't even remember, but they couldn't figure it out. And I said, I think I just popped the rib head out, like I need a chiropractor. But they made me take like 7 x-rays, and they couldn't find anything, and I eventually just said, I really think I need to go see a chiropractor, but my insurance isn't going to cover that. I'll pay out of pocket, and within 3 adjustments, I was all better. It was just frustrating, but like I said, the whole time, just going through the belly button, I've been dealing with all this trauma from childhood and my mom and
well, it would even go
struggling with
further
my
than
child.
that. It would be about like incarnation and being,
Definitely.
born. And in some ways, Joe, it would also kind of bring up some of the challenges that you've had with Orion as well, in terms of his physical limitations.
Definitely.
A lot of that stuff would have come up. And
well, like I said, he needed to go live with his dad for 2 weeks around Christmas. I didn't even put up a tree this year. It's the first year ever. I was such a Scrooge. I was alone. I was sobbing all Christmas Day in deep grief, deep work, and I finally started. I'm working with a homeopathic ayahuasca right now. I'm doing plant spirit medicine work, and ayahuasca deals with a lot of issues around your mom and being incarnate. It's a spiritus symbolicus, it's called.
Yeah.
It's been intense. So I was just curious if there, what was going on in my chart at that point. And I know you said for this coming year, Cancers, it's going to look better in the summertime, but anything in the near future I need to worry about?
Absolutely. I mean, when transiting Saturn, when you're transiting Saturn actually lands on your natal Neptune in your 4th house, and goes into trine with Chiron, and goes into trine with your natal Saturn, or goes into trine with a wide trine with your Sun, with this grand water trine. I think that's a really profound time for you. I think that's a time for endings, beginnings, new beginnings, a lot of resolution, a lot of deep resolution, a lot of acceptance, a lot of healing, a lot of compassion. Yeah. I think it's a great time for you.
So that's
actually.
What was happening in November, those Saturn trines?
Triggering. I think it's a trigger. Trigger. Yeah, and then the resolution is when Saturn hits your Neptune, and that's towards the end of the year. That goes
end of this coming year.
Yeah, Saturn gets to, let's see, hold on, back in 2012. I'm pining for 2012 again.
Oh my God, no way! I was so glad to say goodbye and sayonara. It's 2012.
I had by and large, I think I had a pretty good 2012. Let me see here. Saturn, 17 degrees. So for you, it's going to be really in November. That'll be a powerful time. So where do we go? We go to the new moon, where it all occurred, right? Go to the new moon in November, and that's going to be the 3rd. So the sun will be at 10 degrees. New moon then is at 3 degrees, 17 degrees right there on the 4th. And then Saturn is at 13 degrees, so it's 4 degrees off of your natal Neptune, but it's just hitting your IC at that time. And then it begins to go into trine with your natal Saturn, trine with your Chiron, very big Chiron trine, and then Jupiter Sun trine. At that time, Jupiter is at 20 degrees in Cancer. And what is your Sun sign again? What degree is your Sun sign?
Cancer is Sun in Cancer in the 12th house.
24 degrees.
24, yeah.
So you're going to have Jupiter on your Sun, Saturn getting ready to conjunct your Neptune. Saturn conjunct Neptune can be challenging at times.
And when's that? That's November 2013?
Yeah. But this is the resolution of all that stuff. This is everything. I mean, for me, it feels like that there is complete and utter recognition of healing, cycles coming to an end, new cycles beginning, but extremely fortuitous. And I would not be surprised if you moved during that time.
Well, I need to remember what happened last year with that downstairs tenant. I was wanting to move, and I never did, but she ended up getting out in December, thank God.
Yeah. I had a feeling you would outlast that person, by the way.
Did you?
I did, which is why I said I didn't think it was a good idea for you to move.
No. But I want to move this year.
It'll happen, and I do believe that by November, if you haven't moved by November, November is the trigger for the move. And
Okay.
and wherever you go, you've got to be by water. Okay, either you've got to live by a creek, or you've got to live by a lake or a pond, or you've got to be at the very least, in a complex that has a pool, because water plays such a significant role in your chart. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was raised on a creek, and Ryan's first home and mine was on a creek, and I definitely hear you.
Okay.
I need water.
You do need water, for sure.
I need to swim.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan loves it, too, right? It gives him a sense of liberation in a way, right?
In some ways, he's afraid of it because, he's kind of, he has to do all the work with his arms, and so he gets nervous about drowning. But, yeah, he's having a hard time right now, very hard time.
Well, he's a special kid, and
I know.
He's gonna rise. He's gonna rise.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I just need to find a good big brother for him or something, a geek, because he's all into computers and gaming, and he needs someone to teach him coding, and I don't know anything about computers. So
I know, it's challenging like that. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, it's good hearing your voice, Joe.
And I loved Friday's show, by the way, with Max. It wasn't Friday's show. I love the show with Max. That was totally awesome. But Friday's show that you did, I had to listen to it twice. It was a lot about truth and lies, and you were talking about Lance Armstrong and all that stuff. That was a really great show.
Yeah.
You were smoking. I'm like, wow, Austin's doing good for you, I guess, huh? You liking it?
I do enjoy Austin. To be honest, there's an intensity here. I have my relocated chart. I have Pluto on my ascendant here, and I've noticed that I go through these cycles here in Austin where I'll have days like I really don't do much. I mean, I sit in my apartment, I write, I do reading.
All your cats.
I have my cats. I do my show, and then I do stuff with my kid. So you would think that, what does this guy got going on in his life? But I experience these days where I'll just be flattened with intensity. And I'll just feel like that the wind just got completely knocked out of my sails, and then I find what happens is I get like this intense resolve, and then the next day I get up and I'm like ready to I'm ready to go to the mat again. It's an interesting, it's a different vibe than California for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And I kind of like it because I feel like I'm up against things in some ways here. And I like that intensity.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, cool. Well, thank you again so much. Love your stuff. You're awesome.
Well, thanks, Joe. And it's really funny. Whenever I feel like I'm not writing enough, I think about you for some reason.
Really? Good. Why? Because I was like, when are you going to write? And when I emailed you that, you're like, I'm going to post something tonight. And it was 10 days after that. I'm like, am I going to get on his case? No. He's in his process.
Very funny stuff. It is amazing. All right, well, listen, you take care. Do you want to go on hold again, or are you going to bail out?
No, that's okay. Give somebody else a chance. Thank you so much. Take it easy. We'll stay in
Joe.
touch. Bye.
All right, let's go to the T16. Hello there.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. What's your name?
Dave, calling. Well, I'm in the highway now, but I live in Akron.
Okay, what's going on, Dave?
Just calling to see if I can get a mini reading from you. I love your show. It's really interesting.
Thanks, man. So let's jump into it. Let's find out what your coordinates are here. Let's go here, and let's go here. Let's start plugging you in. Okay, when is your birth date, Dave?
It's August 7th, 1969.
Okay. I have a good friend who's born August 7th.
9:55 a.m. And I was born in Cleveland.
1969, 9:55 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay. In Cleveland.
And I kind of had a question, to be honest with you.
All right. Go ahead.
It seems like my adult life is a lot of mishaps.
Okay.
I run into a lot of obstacles, and nothing major, just minor bombs, and financial problems, that sort of thing.
Right.
Failed ventures,
Okay.
I was a lot of thing there.
things like false starts, right? Like getting things going, things happening, being sidetracked, stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Looking at your chart here, part of it's interesting. I was just talking about Pluto on the ascendant, and what do you have? You've got Pluto on the ascendant. So you have Pluto at 23 degrees in Virgo, and your ascendant is 24 degrees Virgo. You also have Uranus in the first house, which is in Libra at 1 degree, and then Jupiter in Libra at 3 degrees. So let's just break down two of those things, and then let's do a quickie with Saturn in your 8th house. So Pluto on the ascendant in the sign of Virgo is very intense, and by nature, especially with Uranus in your first house, you would be a person, I wouldn't say that is high strung, but you operate at a level of intensity and energy that other people can't relate to at times. Okay, so you're edgy. There's an edgy quality about who you are. There's an intensity, and then there's a desire to make, at times, radical change to the world around you, your environment, and your identity. And as a result of this, people, even though you may have really good intentions and that you don't want to screw anybody over, people can sometimes be put off, at times afraid, at times wary, at times curious about who you are and what you do, because there's a part of you that is kind of overwhelming, to be honest with you. You know, that you deal with the world in a way. And the challenge would be with having, here's where it gets tricky, right? The challenge of having an overwhelming personality, or being intense, or understanding that you may have a sort of a condition of chaos around you, that would be Uranus in the first house, by the way, is that it takes you out of your flow, because you see kind of the impact, not always directly, but indirectly at times, around who you are and what you bring to the world. So then what happens? Well, then what happens is you begin to question yourself, right? You begin to question yourself, you begin to question what you're doing, you begin to question your identity, you begin to question your focus, you begin to question your own direction. And when we begin to question those things, well, then what happens? Well, we lose confidence, we lose our sense of direction, people begin to lose confidence in us, and now we have this whole cycle of almost like self-fulfilling prophecy. So one of the things that I think would be helpful for you is that with Pluto on the ascendant in Virgo, if you start a new venture, or if things begin to happen to you that seem like they're out of your control, you've got to keep going. You have to keep pushing forward, because that's what Pluto does on the ascendant. You must push through the limitations, and you must push through the obstacles in your life. And the way that you do that isn't necessarily by shouting down people or by accusing them of being wrong or accusing them of being the reason why things aren't working. It's more from within, that you have to forge a sense of determination and will in your life that is unshakable. That's Pluto on the ascendant. And I'll just tell you, I'll go right back to what I was sharing with Joe. I've had these experiences since I moved from California to Austin, where I'll have 2 or 3 events, and like I said, I'll just feel like somebody just like punched me in my gut. And then what happens is I sit with it, and I get up the next day, and I'm like, screw that. I'm moving through this. And that's Pluto on the ascendant. The other thing with Pluto on the ascendant, especially in Virgo, is the more that you can make your life about transforming and helping other people's lives, the easier it will become to push through these things. So the less it's about you and the more it's about helping others. I think you have the ability to be a profound healer, by the way, and bring in solutions and healing techniques into other people's lives that can really change people's lives. You've got a wonderful trine between your Sun and Mars. You're very philosophical with Mars and Sagittarius. You've got the Sun-Mars trine, which allows you to be optimistic and positive even when you feel like you're getting down. So the more that you can make it about other people, the easier it is for you to push through these things. One of your biggest challenges, I think, is relationships. And with Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Libra in the first house, you want to chart your own course. You want to be your own dude. You want to really have a sense of kind of radical freedom at times. And yet, you've got Chiron in the 7th house in Aries in relationship. And you would experience in some ways, I wouldn't necessarily say limitation, but you would always come back to wanting to be in a relationship to somehow validate who you are. And that may not necessarily be the right thing at times. You've got Uranus going through your 7th house, and, that's a little tricky. It's just moved off of your natal Chiron, so this may not be the easiest time for you to be in a relationship with other people. You would actually attract pretty erratic people with Uranus in the 7th house. It'd be more of a time where, you would focus, I think, on the flip side or the opposite side, which would be that Uranus and Jupiter conjunction. The other thing, too, with Uranus-Jupiter conjunction is to be able to accentuate your uniqueness. I mean, you've got to be a unique individual with Jupiter conjunct Uranus. You'd have to have unique points of view. You'd be the type of person that would be the head of the curve on things, whether it's film or music or culture. You're the guy that's ahead of the curve. You're ahead of the trend. And the more that you can, also embrace that as well as being kind of a trendsetter, that's going to help you at the same time. And you've got Saturn in Taurus in the 8th house. And that's part of a yod, which is really interesting. You've got a yod, it's like a finger of God, and you've got Venus in Cancer and then Saturn in Taurus, which form a sextile, and then they form this opposition between Mars with the two of them, and so you've got a yod finger of God. And that finger of God is, again, in Sagittarius. It's optimistic, it's positive, and it's being able to continue to kind of reframe your own expectations and your own setbacks. Sagittarius is always thinking about, well, what did I just learn from this? What did I just learn from this? Sagittarius takes setbacks and turns it into wisdom. So you've got that, and that's something you really need to practice, with that finger of God. And the thing is that the more that you practice that and the more that you learn from that and the more that you take yourself out of, I'm unlucky or shit happens or, the more that you take yourself out of that and you say, look, what did I just learn from this? What can I learn from this? Where can I grow from this? That is really empowering, and you ultimately have the ability to show that to other people as well. So your Saturn right now, Saturn in the 8th house is about intensity, it's about depth, it's about going into your conditions at a fairly deep level. And Pluto right now is trining your Saturn. And it's going to move off of your Saturn a little bit as the year goes on, but then it moves back to 9 degrees. So you actually have an opportunity now to plumb the depths and to go into your belief systems, to go into understanding, maybe why things happen to you. Where do you program your thoughts? Where do you program your feelings? And these things can be very, very subtle. We may have a thought and a feeling, and we charge it with emotion, and then we walk away from it, we bury it, and then it sprouts up, a couple of days or a couple of weeks later, and we've got these weeds that we need to pull. And right now, with Pluto trining your Saturn, you have great insight into this process. And so you can actually begin to change the process by implanting positive or more holistic thoughts and feelings around what happens to you. I actually think this year could be quite good for you, especially because you've got Jupiter up in your 9th house currently, transiting. It's going to conjunct your moon in Gemini. And that's a great time for you to expand your horizons, maybe date somebody from another culture. That would be really interesting for you. I think you should travel, by the way. If you have any opportunity to travel, it would be a great time to travel and expand your horizons. And then, this summer, this year, Jupiter moves into your 10th house, and that's where you are, that's where your career is, that's where your public standing is. And you're going to have a Jupiter-Venus conjunction, which would be an interesting time for you to start a new relationship, and a relationship that would be much more nurturing than other relationships. Somehow, you've got to find a way to honor that Venus in the 10th house, which is artistic, it's creative. I would say, if you had any kind of interest in the culinary arts, or being a chef, or feeding people, but not just feeding people, but at a high level, like doing really interesting things with food at a creative level, then Venus in your 10th house would be a nice place to get that out. Also, anything having to do with interior design, architecture, decorating, stuff like that, that would be also a really good piece for you, especially in 2013 when Jupiter comes in to your 10th house. It allows you to feel more at ease and like with your feminine side as well. Like guys get, they get hassled sometimes. Oh, what do you like to, you're into fashion. There's this guy that plays for the 49ers, Michael Crabtree.
Mm-hmm.
He's totally into fashion. You watch him during his press conferences. He's wearing, freaking Gucci sunglasses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
When Michael Crabtree came into the league, people they were questioning his manhood. Oh, this guy's into fashion. He draws clothes and things. Well, Michael Crabtree, he's a football player. You watch him play, he'll take your head off if he has the ball. And he's got pictures of his girlfriend. I mean, the guy's anything, but this stereotypical, image that people in that world would hold. But he's just got this interest in fashion. So, we run up against these stereotypes, these cultural stereotypes at times. And Jupiter coming into your 10th house allows you to be more okay with you tapping into your feminine side, your creative side, your artistic side. So whether it's food or clothing or interior design, or even, taking time out to help other people. I think that's really highlighted for you in 2013, especially summer onwards. And then later, as Jupiter gets up to you, later in the year, it begins to go into mutual reception with that Pluto in your first house on your ascendant. I think that's a great time for you. It feels to me like your confidence reaches a new level, and you're able to kind of integrate and bring other strands together about who you are. You have the opportunity to find the right person. You have the opportunity to find the right profession or trade, and it's all connected with, I think, the return of this or the embrace of the feminine. So I think that this year is actually a pretty dynamic year, and it's a year with growth. The other thing that you have to look forward to, by the way, is when Uranus in 2014 gets up to 13 and 14 degrees of Aries and begins to trine your sun. Look out. That's going to be a really fun time. It's going to be a really electric time. Your creativity is going to be really crackling. You're going to get lots of ideas. And I think finally, during that Uranus-Sun trine, you're going to get rewarded for being, quote unquote, different, or being outside the box, or being ahead of the curve, and being individual. It's like all those things that you sort of fought for and kind of, maybe took some flack for, they're finally being rewarded at that time. So I think Uranus and with Saturn, because Saturn is going to be down in your second house. The thing with Saturn in the second house is you have to work hard, okay? I hate to break the news, but the next 2 years, you're going to work hard. But it's not without gain. It's just, the more that you work with Saturn, the harder you work, especially as Saturn second house transit, the more money you make, the more ground you cover. So don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and do what you need to do, okay?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's it. I kind of had a question. It's kind of off subject about one of your prior podcasts.
Sure.
On the Jovan Belcher one.
The Jovan Belcher, yeah.
Can you expand? I think we're thinking about the same thing, but you were commenting on the Will Smith aspect of that.
Yeah, there's a guy by the name of Ed Sheeran who does this work on doubles and actors.
Yeah.
And he says that Jovan Belcher was actually Will Smith.
I swear I've read that somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and I have a very hard time believing that. Only because Jovan Belcher played at the University of Maine. He's got a track record as a collegiate football player. He's got players that played with him. Montel Owens, who plays running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, was a college teammate of Jovan Belcher. Jovan Belcher actually had 50 tackles 2 years ago, which is a significant amount of play. I just have a hard time believing. Now maybe you can make a case where Jovan Belcher was taken out, and then Will Smith played Jovan Belcher for a while. I have a hard time with that notion, simply because of where he was and the cookie trail that existed for Jovan Belcher. And he made this connection between the ears of Jovan Belcher and Will Smith, and the whole thing being that that here we have a case where that this event theoretically occurred, which would lead towards more events, which would lead towards gun control in this country.
Yeah, right.
Now, what's really interesting, though, if you go back and you look at that movie, 6 Degrees of Separation, and there is a scene in that movie where Will Smith is talking to Donald Sutherland and what's her name, the woman that plays his wife in the movie. He's talking to them about his theory on Catcher in the Rye, and the whole scene, the whole movie is all about deception, and it's all about people portraying themselves as other people. Like in the film, he portrays himself as Sidney Poitier's son, and that gets him in with these socialites in New York City, and he's such a gifted and cunning liar that he's able to play upon their aspirations and to play upon their vanity, and to do so in a way that in some ways they don't even really mind because they've had such a good time with him. But he talks about Catcher in the Rye in this very knowing way. And of course, Catcher in the Rye is linked to the death of John Lennon, right? The shooting of John Lennon. And it's Will Smith who's talking about this. If you can actually go onto YouTube and see this scene, and if you haven't seen this scene before, I really recommend that you see it, because there's something that's being revealed in that scene. It's almost very knowing, and there's a term for this. It's called hidden in plain sight. And I believe that Will Smith is divulging something through that movie and through that scene that we're supposed to look at. And I actually feel it has more to do with Barack Obama than anything else. Because I believe that scene in that movie has to do with Will Smith as Barack Obama. That's what I feel. That's what it feels like to me in that film. A young Barack Obama, before Barack Obama even becomes part of our consciousness. Because there's also, I believe, Will Smith goes to, he is actually pretending that he goes to Yale. And of course, Barack Obama theoretically went to school, even though he was on the law review there. There are people both at Yale and Columbia that's like, well, there's nobody here by that name. I mean, there are people that went to school at Columbia during the time that Obama went there that don't recall him. So again, there are these touch points, and there's also just a very interesting relationship between Obama and Will Smith. In fact, some people even think, and I don't think it's the case, but there are some people who think that Obama is Will Smith. I won't go that far, but but there is something in that scene that I think is very telling, and I think it's code. But I don't believe that Will Smith was Jovan Belcher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, that's great.
All right, man.
Thank
you for calling in, Dave.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Take care. All right, that's Dave, and we've reached the end of the show. Apparently, went faster than I thought it would. I was kind of struggling during the first hour to get my energy up. But I played some music. You know what I did when I played that music? I made some coffee. Ah, yes, coffee. All right. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. This is Robin Phoenix. You've been listening to the Navigating the Astrological Matrix. I'll be back on Friday with the Friday forecast. Cross your fingers. I'm working on a very important guest. If we pull it off, it'll be a major coup, and you'll enjoy hearing what he has to say. All right. I'll see you on Friday. Take good care, and much love to every single one of you. Adios.
In the name I am that I am, son of tomorrow, I call forth the light of the living word, beloved Elohim, beloved archangels, beloved mighty Choans of the rays and the lords of karma. I call for the action of beloved Pallas Athena, beloved goddess of liberty, beloved Nada, beloved Kuan Yin, beloved Portia, beloved great divine director, beloved all-seeing eye of God, Cyclopeia. Let God's will be done, let God's will be done, let God's will be done. I demand the action of the sacred fire in this hour. Descend on mighty cosmos, secret rays. I am the holding of the balance of Lord Gautama Buddha, beloved Sanat Kumara and the seven holy Kumaras. I call upon the sacred fire, I call upon the light of God that never fails. Beloved mighty, I am present, come forth in this hour of the victory. Come forth in this hour of the victory of the God slain. I demand the full power of beloved mighty, be with us this night. Beloved Jesus, send to me, Lord, my Savior, Gautama and Son of Kumara.